"We didn't order for your son," my sister said, passing a piece of crusty bread to the small boy clutching my hand. Her voice was smooth but sharp, like a knife wrapped in velvet. I forced a smile as I looked down at my son's plate, a single, pale piece of bread, while across the table, my sister's kids devoured juicy $2 steaks. I squeezed my son's shoulder gently. "It's okay, baby. Eat your bread." But inside, my heart shattered with every bite he took. The bread was hard, dry, and bitter just like the moment. Chapter 1. The dinner table divide. It was supposed to be a celebration. My sister, Carla, had finally landed that promotion she'd been chasing for years, and she wanted the family to celebrate. The invitation came with a promise of fancy food, laughter, and old memories revived. I had hesitated at first, thinking how the last few years had changed us. Carla's life had ballooned with wealth and status, while I struggled with bills, a job that barely paid, and raising my son alone. But I said yes, hoping for warmth, hoping for family. When we arrived, the restaurant was elegant crystal chandeliers, white linen, and the scent of sizzling steaks in the air. Carla's children sat proudly, polished and well-fed, their plates piled high with delicacies. I watched as the waiter brought the menus, then came to us. My son, small and shy, barely spoke, but when he looked up, I saw the hunger not just for food, but for belonging. And then Carla said it. "We didn't order for your son." The words hung in the air, heavier than the silverware clinking nearby. I glanced at the waiter. No steak, no side dishes, just bread. My son's eyes flickered with confusion and hurt. I swallowed my anger and shame, took the bread, and handed it to him. I watched as he chewed quietly, trying not to cry. I wanted to scream at Carla, to demand why she would humiliate us like this, but instead, I folded the moment into the deep well of pain I had learned to hide inside. After the meal, the kids ran off to play, and Carla avoided my gaze. I knew she was pretending nothing had happened. But I wasn't so blind. Chapter 2. Quiet endurance. Weeks passed. I didn't tell anyone about that night. Not my friends, not even my mother. It was a wound I carried silently. My son asked why he wasn't allowed the same food as his cousins, but I told him some people are not kind, and that someday things would change. Late at night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene. My sister's cold smile, her eyes flickering with disdain. We had grown up inseparable, sharing secrets, clothes, dreams, but somewhere along the way, something had broken. Was it envy, pride, or the simple cruelty that some people show when they feel superior? My son cuddled beside me, warm and trusting. I promised myself I would protect him, even if it meant walking a lonely road. I started saving every penny, picking up extra shifts, quietly building a future where we wouldn't need anyone's crumbs. Chapter 3. The turning point. Slowly, things began to shift. I took night classes while working 2 jobs. I met people who believed in me, who offered help without judgment. A small startup noticed my talent, and soon I was managing projects, earning promotions, and finding confidence in my own strength. Carla's calls became fewer. When we spoke, the words were polite but distant, like strangers making small talk. Her family's charm wore thin as I watched her children's privilege falter under their own pressures. The steak dinners gave way to quieter, more modest meals. I never gloated. I simply kept rising. My son blossomed too, smart, kind, and proud. He learned to stand tall, no longer ashamed of the bread he once ate. Chapter 4. Sweet revenge. The family reunion came a year later, held at Carla's new house, an imposing mansion with expensive furniture and manicured lawns. I arrived with my son, dressed not to impress, but to declare I had arrived. Carla greeted us with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Look at you," she said. "You're doing well." I nodded, thanks to hard work and a little luck. The meal was different this time. I ordered the finest dishes for my son, watching him eat a thick, juicy steak with a grin. Carla's youngest glanced over, envy flickering in his eyes. Later, I spoke softly to Carla. "You offered us bread when we came hungry. I've learned that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't bitterness, but success." She said nothing, and I didn't expect her to. but I saw the regret in her face, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of that night lift. Because in the end, it wasn't about the food, it was about dignity, and reclaiming what was always mine. The sting of that night lingered far beyond the restaurant's polished walls. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of my son, small and bewildered, clutching that piece of dry bread, as if it was the last thing keeping him from fading away. I wondered how something so simple a meal could become a symbol of rejection, so sharp it felt like it pierced straight through my heart. After we left, the silence between Carla and me was heavier than any words. She acted as if nothing had happened, as if the cold dismissal was just a casual moment lost in the noise of the evening. But I knew better. It was a statement, a dividing line etched deep into the fabric of our family. Back home, I found myself watching my son more carefully, noticing how he flinched when he saw pictures of his cousins, how he hid his hunger behind forced smiles. I hated that he was growing up feeling less loved, less worthy, less enough. I wanted to shield him from it all, to keep the cruel world at bay. But the world was relentless. At night, when the house was quiet and my son slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, the weight of that moment pressing down like a stone. I remembered how close Carla and I once were. Best friends, secret keepers, partners in childhood mischief. We'd built dreams together, promising to never let the world change us, but it did. It changed her into someone I barely recognized. I thought about the last conversation we had before that dinner. How she'd hinted that my life was slipping out of control. How she looked at me like I was a charity case, a project doomed to fail. Those words stung more than the bread, because they weren't about food. They were about judgment, about looking down on me and my son like we were less than family. But beneath the hurt, beneath the humiliation, something else stirred, a quiet flame of resolve. I knew I couldn't rely on Carla, or anyone else, to save me. I had to save myself, for my son's sake, for mine. I started to keep track of every penny, every opportunity I could seize. I took on extra shifts at work, even when exhaustion dragged me down. I enrolled in night classes, determined to build a better future. It was hard, so hard, but every moment of struggle was a promise to my son that things would change, and change they did, slowly and painfully. Carla's world and mine drifted further apart. Invitations to family gatherings became rare, and when they came, the warmth was gone, replaced by polite distance. Her family thrived on their privilege and status, while I carved out a life from sheer grit and determination. My son learned to hide his pain behind resilience. We became experts at quiet endurance, yet no matter how much time passed, I never forgot that night. It was a scar I wore not as a mark of shame, but as a reminder that some wounds are not meant to break you. They are meant to forge you stronger. And so, I waited and I planned, because someday, the bread would be just a memory, and the steak would be ours. The days that followed that bitter dinner blurred into a steady rhythm of hard work and quiet determination. I buried myself in late night classes, my textbooks sprawled across the kitchen table, my son's homework beside mine. We were a small team, struggling but steady, facing the world that had seemingly closed its doors on us. At first, the changes were almost imperceptible. A promotion at work that paid a little more. A new friendship with a colleague who saw potential in me when I didn't see it myself. Slowly, the fog of despair lifted, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years: hope. I refused to let Carla's coldness define me. When she'd casually mention her lavish vacations or her kids' elite private school, I smiled inside and reminded myself that her world was built on fragile facades. Meanwhile, I was constructing something real and lasting for my son and me. One day, a small startup company, impressed by my dedication and fresh ideas, offered me a managerial position. It wasn't a corner office with a view, but it was a start, and I grabbed it with both hands. The job demanded more than I thought I could give, but I thrived in the challenge. I learned how to lead, negotiate, and build relationships. Each success was a quiet victory, a step away from the humiliations of the past. Carla's family, once so dazzling in their wealth, began to show cracks. I heard through the grapevine that her husband's business was struggling. The expensive dinners became less frequent, the parties smaller, the smiles more forced. I didn't gloat. I had learned the value of grace. Our rare conversations grew colder, more strained. When Carla saw me at family events, she no longer dismissed me outright, but studied me with thinly veiled wariness. I was no longer the struggling sister she could ignore or pity. I was becoming someone she had to reckon with. My son blossomed in this new reality too. The boy who once accepted dry bread with quiet resignation now walked taller, his laughter returning. He started excelling in school, making friends and dreaming big. I saw in him the reflection of my own strength, and it filled me with pride. With every small victory, I felt the heavy chains of that dinner night loosen. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. And as my confidence grew, so did my resolve. I knew that the day would come when I would face Carla again, not as the sister who accepted bread in silence, but as the woman who demanded respect. That day, I promised myself, would be sweet. The invitation to the family reunion came a few days before Carla's lavish summer party, a sprawling event held at her new mansion, the kind that glittered with chandeliers and echoed with polite laughter. For years, I had dreaded these gatherings, knowing how my presence would be met with cold stares and whispered judgments. But this time was different. This time I was ready. My son and I arrived together not in designer clothes or flashy cars, but in the quiet confidence of those who have fought and won battles no one saw. I caught Carla's eye across the manicured lawn as we stepped inside. Her smile was polite but tight, the warmth of old sisterhood replaced by something cautious, almost wary. "Look at you," she said, her voice carrying the usual edge of superiority. "You're doing well." I nodded, returning the look without apology. Thanks to hard work, determination, and a little luck, things change. The room was full of familiar faces, but this time I was not invisible. People greeted me with respect, some even with genuine admiration. Whispers floated that I had been promoted again, that I was starting a business of my own, that my son was excelling beyond expectations. The moment came when the food was served. I watched as my son's plate was filled generously with the finest cuts of steak, vegetables roasted to perfection, and desserts that sparkled with sweetness. He ate with a joyful abandon that made my heart swell, no longer the boy who hid behind bread, but a young man claiming his place. I caught Carla's youngest son, staring enviously at my son's plate, a flicker of something like regret passing across his face. It was a silent acknowledgement of a shift in power, a reversal of fortune that could not be ignored. Later, I found Carla alone on the terrace, her gaze fixed on the sunset. I approached quietly. "You offered us bread when we came hungry," I said softly. "But I learned that the sweetest revenge isn't bitterness. It's success, it's dignity, it's giving your son what he deserves." She said nothing, but I saw the cracks in her facade, the regret, the recognition of what she lost. As I turned to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. The wound of that night at the restaurant was no longer a burden, but a scar, a reminder of how far I had come. And as my son walked beside me, his laughter mingling with the evening breeze, I knew the future was ours. No more bread, only steak, and more.